Meanwhile, the Spanish Workers in Gibraltar Association, ASTEG, has hit out at what it describes as a new double filter initiative at the frontier, similar to those put in place during the 1990s. The workers claim these double filter inspections are being exercised by the Guardia Civil and are causing further aggravation and unnecessary delay for frontier workers. The government has sent the European Commission over 500 complaints against the Spanish frontier delays since last November. They've come mainly from EU nationals who work in Gibraltar and live in Spain, but also include local residents and non-EU nationals and tourists. Number 6 Convent Place insists the delays are politically motivated and illegal and say they should be stopped.
Ever since Spain started turning up the heat at the frontier, the Office of the Deputy Chief Minister has been in charge of keeping Brussels abreast of what's going on down there. This latest dossier Joseph Garcia has sent the European Commission has been finalised just as the Commission's own 6-month deadline for evaluating progress in fluidity or otherwise is due to expire. Statistics show the situation isn't improving. Since November 2013, when the EC sent letters to the British and Spanish governments with recommendations on what each should do, there have been delays of at least an hour on most days for traffic entering Spain, and the peak has been 4 hours. Pedestrians have also suffered, with those unlucky enough to queue on the 24th of February having to endure a 90-minute wait.
What we do is very simple. We compile a statistical dossier first. So we have details of the queues coming into Gibraltar. Going out of Gibraltar. When the Spaniards started implementing queues on the way in, we then expanded the dossier to include the queues coming into Gibraltar as well. When they started with the pedestrian queues at the end of last year, we started then including data on pedestrian queues also. So the Commission actually gets very comprehensive statistical data of the average queuing time and the longest queuing time on every single day of the year. At least for the last 6 months. Then, in addition to that, we include photographs, so you have some very impacting pictures of pedestrian queues, where they used to go all the way around the air terminal and all the way around the frontier area, which obviously is absolutely deplorable, but it has an impact. And then we also included press cuttings, so they have press cuttings of the Gibraltar press, of the UK press, and even also the Spanish press, where indeed perhaps for the first time in the last few months, you're seeing rumblings of discontent among Spanish workers, among Spanish politicians, the Junta Andalucía, the Mayor of La Línea, the Mayor of San Roque. So all that helps as well, because it shows that the delays are not something that concern Gibraltar and Gibraltarians only. They concern Spanish citizens, they concern EU nationals, particularly those who actually work in Gibraltar and live in Spain.
You mentioned the rumblings in the Spanish press. We also saw this week, in fact, how one newspaper in Spain has highlighted what seem to be the plans for the Spanish side of the frontier for measures there to improve ostensibly traffic flow. Do you think that those proposals will ever see the light of day? And if they do, will they actually reduce the problems?
Well, that looks to me more like a leak to the media than an official announcement. We haven't seen anything from the Spanish Foreign Ministry or from the Spanish Interior Ministry or anywhere official. But really looking at the diagrams, obviously there are certain areas which cause concern, because they plan to have 6 lanes coming into Gibraltar where the problem really is caused by them and their checks, and only 4 lanes going out. So, and of the 4 lanes going out, 2 appear to be red lanes. We have 6 lanes going out, and they will have 4, 2 of which are red. At the moment, there is 1 red lane and 2 green lanes anyway, 1 for motorbikes and 1 for cars. So really, the issue is not only the infrastructure, the number of lanes and the number of red channels, the number of green channels. The issue is also the flow of traffic and the nature of the checks that you carry out. If you stop every single car in 20 lanes, then you will still get 4 queues, but they'll be spread out over 20 lanes.
I guess that from Gibraltar's point of view, it's important to keep highlighting these problems and these delays at the border, because otherwise there's a risk that when we suddenly have a 30-minute to 1-hour queue, people might think that that's not so bad compared to 4 or 5-hour queues. You have to avoid that mindset setting in here in Gibraltar.
No, the government believes it's absolutely essential and extremely important to make sure that we keep the Commission informed and about what's going on. Not just the Commission, this also goes to MPs, it goes to MEPs, so it creates an awareness. First of all, the problem is still there. And secondly, also, there's a duty to keep on raising this issue because people continue to be affected by the delays. And the people who either live in Gibraltar or who work in Gibraltar or come to Gibraltar as tourists. A very high proportion of those who complain to us are EU nationals. We've had people, for example, from the United States also file complaints. So obviously it's important that they understand that we take the complaints seriously, that the delays have nothing to do with Gibraltar. These are generated deliberately and illegally by the Spanish authorities, and that we are doing everything in our power to try and stop them.
The government stated this week the allocation process for the new affordable housing schemes is being carried out strictly in accordance with the waiting list of the 9th of December 2011, with absolutely no exceptions. This follows a call from the opposition to institute an open and transparent process in the allocation of homes in the two new affordable housing schemes.
In a statement, the GST had said the government's recent defensive statement was not surprising, given the negative public comments in relation to the lack of transparency, which it claims shrouds the allocation process. It added the comments are echoed in complaints made to it and recalls that in relation to estates like waterproof terraces, it instituted a system of public draws. But the government claims that system was unfair, as it was based on economic power and not on need or waiting time, with those who could pay 100% given the first choice. It states that those with a high position on the list have already been interviewed, and those lower down will be waiting for their interview. No one, it claims, has jumped the queue, and not a single exception has been made. 90 applicants have been interviewed, and 85 of them have accepted the offer of a new home. The government says it can categorically state that none of these were upgraders, who it adds will not be considered for allocation until the end of the process. Number 6 has pledged to publish a full list of all the allocated properties and the housing list of December 2011 at the end of the process, so that everyone will be able to judge for themselves the objective fairness of the allocations.
The GST opposition says it fully identifies with the call by Unite the Union's Young Members Committee for a revival of the apprenticeships programme and a return to the trade and partnership agreements with the private sector. It says the points raised by Unite are precisely what is lacking in the government's future jobs strategy. Stephen Nish put it to party deputy leader Damon Bossino that this issue has become something of a hobby horse for him.
Well, it is a very important issue. It is a very important issue which impacts on the lives of many, many young people in Gibraltar and those who are unemployed. And it also impacts on the future of our economic survival. That's the way we see things, Stephen. Now, the fact is that we have come up with this statement because it seems that very few people in Gibraltar, other than the government, seems to think that the future job strategy is working. I mean, certainly from the anecdotal evidence that I can give you from speaking to those in the private sector in various areas of industry, whether it's in gaming, whether it's in Main Street trade, or indeed even in construction, they are not particularly enamored of this project. But now, and this is the important development, is that yesterday we had the Young Members Committee of Unite the Union criticising, in effect, the scheme, because what they're calling for, and this is what we've been calling for, in fact, the political discourse they now have is exactly the same as ours, which is, let's see a return to vocational training, let's see a return of apprenticeships, and let's see, again, the partnership between the government, the state, and the private sector, which was very much a policy which we championed when we were in government.
You say that, but of course the government says that when the GST were in office, the scheme that you had wasn't particularly good because it paid the trainees far less than they do at the moment, that they get at the moment when they're on the minimum wage, of course, and also that they didn't have wonderful job opportunities either.
Look, the fact is that the government is now incurring an incredible amount of public expenditure on their scheme. I've said so before, and it's been made public by the government itself. They set aside a figure of £12 million on an annual basis.
But that's precisely because they're getting paid the minimum wage.
Well, yes, fine. But that is not the point. The point is that there's a lot of public expenditure in this scheme, but what training is there? There's very little, if anything at all, in relation to training. And that is something which the government needs to answer for. What participation is there from the private sector, for example?
Well, the government says that over 50% of the trainees are actually getting jobs at the end of their training program.
Stephen, the fact is that the government, in particular Mr. Bolsonaro, as you know, you and I have followed politics for many years, has a penchant for statistics. But the fact is you need to go behind those statistics. And if you go behind those statistics, it is very clear that the private sector isn't supportive of the scheme. And now the union isn't, in effect, supportive of the scheme. And this is something that we need to address. Why do we need to address it? It is very simple. Because we need to address the skills deficit. And how do you do that? You do that by providing structured training, which will provide, as Kevin Coyne, again from United Union, has said, is a highly skilled, highly motivated professional workforce, which you need for any successful economy.
Also this week, the government awarded the tender for the design and build of the small boats marina to GJBS in the sum of £23.6 million. The Merache trial continued, with Benjamin Merache saying he was extremely hurt by all the losses his clients suffered because of what he called the ill-thought-out investigation and closure of Merache & Co. And the Congress of Liberal International called on the Spanish government to end the campaign of coercion and economic sanctions against Gibraltar. For the rest of this week's news, you can head over to our website, gbc.gi/news. Don't forget to tune in to Radio Gibraltar and GBC Television throughout the week for the very latest local news. You can also follow us on Twitter and like us on our Facebook page. From the team, thank you for watching. Good night.